Good morning, Washington. Welcome on into the AWB Game Day set. We're so glad that you've joined us today to continue our fifth in a series of celebrating manufacturing in the great state of Washington. Today, as you can tell, we're reporting live from the Port of Vancouver at Warehouse 23, today's sponsor for this show. Also home to the mouth of the Great Columbia River. Today is day 4, not 5, of our Manufacturing Week Live show, and we couldn't be happier to be here in Vancouver today as we talk about trade, infrastructure, and logistics. In Clark County, there are 13,000 men and women who wake up every day and go to work for a manufacturing company, making great products that we use in our everyday lives. In fact, those 13,000 men on average and women make an average wage of $62,000 a year. So these are great family wage jobs right here in Clark County. And certainly, if anything we've learned during COVID and the pandemic here, manufacturing is essential. It's essential to our success, it's essential to our economy, and it's essential as we think about rebuilding our economy here. AWB is honored to serve as the state's Chamber of Commerce and Manufacturing Association. As I mentioned, today's show is going to focus on transportation, trade, supply chain, infrastructure, and logistics. To begin with, I'd like to thank our friends at Premera Blue Cross for sponsoring today's program. Premera is investing $250 million to improve access to care, combat homelessness, and support programs that address behavioral and mental health issues in our local communities. No matter where you are, like us, AWB and Premera are in your corner. We have a fantastic show today. We will hear from Ambassador Greg Dowd, who's the Chief Agriculture Negotiator for the Office of the United States Trade Rep. We have a great bipartisan panel featuring Senators Ann Rivers and Annette Cleveland. All of this and much more are coming up. We're going to get this kicked off in a big way today and focus on the amazing productivity of Washington farms and ranches. First up, we're going to check in with one of the country's biggest and most successful exporters of great tasting milk, cheese, and butter. Stan Ryan is the CEO of Dairygold, which is based in Seattle. Dairygold is the marketing and processing subsidiary of Northwest Dairy Association, which is owned by over 350 dairy farm families in Washington, Oregon, Idaho, and Montana. They are one of the largest U.S. dairy processors, handling about 10 billion pounds of milk a year. Stan, as a dairy farm kid growing up on a dairy farm, welcome on in. It's great to talk to you about your great industry.
It's great to be here. Great to be here with you as you're hanging out underneath the bridge, it looks.
It is. And speaking of that bridge, it's amazing to realize, we're the most trade-driven state in the country, and certainly a company like Dairygold knows how important trade is. Sum up for us, how has the industry been impacted during COVID-19?
Well, quite substantially. Speaking of trade, so 40% of all the milk that comes off of Washington, Oregon dairy farms into Dairygold goes overseas and exports in the form of products. COVID's been a big one for us. Put in perspective, if you look at the farms, the factories, and all the directly supported industries, the real direct ones, it's about 20,000 jobs, about $5 billion in economic activity, and another $1 billion in wages. Significant industry in our state. We hit a sort of a perfect storm, if you will, as we come into the spring and we get great grass and everything. Cow milk production goes up. At the same time, COVID hit and demand went down. Food service closed. Retail demand went up, but aggregate demand went down. We got into a big oversupply situation as an industry. Prices came down about 30%. I think it hit the farm gate check of all of our farmers, Washington, Oregon, a little more than $100 million. So it was painful, stressful, and pretty hard on everybody. Recovery's been pretty good since then. We're not at great farm prices, but we got way off the bottom. I think the government response was pretty good. Monetary authority response was great. Huge. Fiscal as well. Direct payments to farmers. There was a $1 dairy program that came through, and the food boxes for families from farmers. We're on our third or fourth wave of that, and that's been quite substantial and quite impactful for the needy and for the rural communities both. So it's been a turbulent road. At Dairygold, we've had 69 positives throughout our network, but essential industry, we've kept running the whole time. Got some pretty good applause from the health authorities for all the steps taken. But again, that's been expensive and stressful.
You know, Stan, we can't talk about trade, not talk about trade policy for a minute. Be curious to get your perspectives on USMCA and how has that impacted your industry and kind of what's your outlook on USMCA?
Yeah, well, I think it's a great structural success that the USTR and the administration orchestrated, and it was needed. And we had revised that NAFTA for over 20 years or so. For dairy, Mexico is our biggest market, and two, Canada was one of our bigger infringers, if you will. We had no access to the market. With USMCA, we got a 3% access. And they had this system of cross-subsidized exports that came right out of Washington back, if you will. And the administration got that blocked. Ambassador Dowd got that blocked. And I think very substantially in USMCA, they put in language that forces Canada to be transparent with what they're doing. It gave us the tools for the future to hold them accountable to what they agreed to. We've never had a lot of that stuff before, so it's one of multiple successes in trade policy over the last few years.
Stan, we're about to have the ambassador here that follows our segment here. What would be a couple key messages you'd want him to know about the industry and about how it's performing in the Pacific Northwest?
Yeah. You know, I think first I'd say thanks. Thanks for your engagement. Ambassador Dowd and Ambassador Lighthouse, they get well prepared and they're tenacious negotiators in going after a number of things. We already talked about USMCA, but Japan Phase 1 leveled the playing field for 90% of U.S. dairy to Japan. We are a big seller of dairy gold into Japan. That was going away, if you will, without that. Phase 1 China, we went zero for about 18, 24 months. We're back selling into China again and starting to grow and investing against specifications in plants to sell China going forward. And there's a lot more on the horizon. I think we're just in one of these eras, Chris, where trade is hot, trade deals are being made. Sometimes we go through a decade or two where there's no trade deals, and you've got to play when it's time to play. So if anything, a message to say thanks for what's happening. They engage, especially with the IDFA, International Dairy Foods Association. They engage the industry well, they get knowledgeable. And I think they go into negotiations having almost more knowledge of the dairy trade situation than our rivals, and be able to come out with some structural advantages. There's a lot more deals to come. Our competitors around the world, Europe, for example, they're on the move, they're trying to do more trade deals, we've got a lot more to go. But I like we're leaning into things with a history of success, whereas a few years ago, it was all headwind and going backwards. So thank you and keep going, don't stop. That'd be my message.
Well, I think I'd echo that. You can't be the most trade-driven state in the country and not talk about the importance of having good trade policy going forward.
Absolutely.
Hey, for legislators that might be listening in, Stan, do you spend 30 seconds, if you would, about what could they do to help your important industry?
Yeah, long conversations on many levels. I'll just hit a couple things. I think rural development of all kinds, rural support, rural development, rural economy is really needed in our state. The example that COVID's brought forward is the percentage of the population needing food assistance, whether it's on SNAP, Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or food through just all the feeding banks. That percentage of the population in rural Washington, it's 2x Seattle. It's twice as high. The need is great. We need the attention rural, not just on urban Washington going forward. I think the other thing is that Washington agriculture, dairy for sure, is a leader in sustainability, and we'd like to see some leadership out of the legislature to get some balance to those discussions so that we get the pros and cons in the right order. We protect the environment, but we grow and do good economic things too, and see facts and data and science and technology be our guide rather than other issues. I think the other thing is I'd say, it may be national issues, but based on things like immigration, whether immigration or farm level immigration, we are so overdue for immigration reform, and our state needs it, our rural economy and needs it desperately.
Well, Stan, I want to thank you for joining us as a young child who had to deliver glass bottles of milk to neighborhood families and farms around where we grew up, I appreciate all the things you do. And a great reminder, milk just doesn't come from the grocery store, it's got to come from a cow to start with.
Yeah. Well, thank you. And if you want to distribute some more milk, we'll put you to work, Chris.
Thank you much, Stan. Be safe out there.
See you.
All right. Let's keep this conversation going, talking about great farm exports and moving. America's farms and ranches are an export powerhouse. In 2018, more than $139 billion worth of corn, soybeans, apples, cherries, and great Eastern Washington soft white winter wheat were exported. There's one person in the federal government whose job is to wake up every day and make sure that we have trade deals that keep us humming and that American farmers have access to international markets, and that's Ambassador Greg Dowd. He's the Chief Agriculture Negotiator in the Office of the United States Trade Representative, and he's with us now via Zoom. Mr. Ambassador, welcome to Washington State. We're glad to have you with us.
Well, thanks for having me out here. It's beautiful weather out here. It's glad to see you've kind of got the smoke cleared away finally.
Well, Ambassador, I would tell folks in Washington, D.C., you know, Washington State has 365 degrees days of sunshine every day, just sometimes they're covered by the clouds.
That's exactly right. My first job out of graduate school 29 years ago was with U.S. Wheat Associates in Portland. So I actually did live out here for a year once upon a time.
It's right across my shoulder here today if the fog was lifted here, or maybe you're starting to see that lift. Hey, let's pick up and talk about USMCA, if you would. Share some of the key benefits, if you would, from this agreement. USMCA has both Washington's and the U.S.'s number 1 and 2 trading partners. So give us some perspectives on that, if you would.
Right. Most of the tariffs with NAFTA in agriculture were already zero before we started this negotiation. What we tried to do with USMCA was really enhance what we had with opportunities in dairy with Canada, and we made a significant amount of progress there. We also updated what we were doing with regard to the use of technology in agriculture, such as biotechnology, and I think that's going to play a really important role as we move forward with Mexico. So overall, you look at this, what we've done in this administration with Canada, Mexico, Japan, and China. Those are our top 4 agricultural markets. That's 47% of our $141 billion in ag exports. And Kansas Farm Boy terminology were overhauled in just the last couple of years in this administration.
You know, Ambassador, staying on the theme of trade and trade deals, we are in the phase 1 of the U.S.-China deal here. Can you talk about both some of the benefits and challenges of the phase 1 deal?
You know, that was truly a historic discussion we had with China. My counterpart in those negotiations was the Vice Minister of Agriculture of China. He and I undertook 33 negotiating sessions to accomplish that deal, and hundreds of hours of discussions between he and his team of 40 or 50 people and me and my team of 30 or 40 people involving all aspects of the U.S. government when it comes to agriculture. Through the course of those discussions, we came upon some 57 different structural changes or changes that need to be made in our trading relationship in agriculture between the U.S. and China to get where we needed to be. I'm happy to report now that deal entered into force in the middle of February. Now we have actually we have completed 50 of those 57 changes have become operational. And as a result of that, before we started these discussions, we had somewhere in around 1,500 facilities in the United States that could export their products to China, whether that was alfalfa, hay pelleting, meat processing, dairy, whatever it was, pet food, 1,500 facilities. Today, I'm happy to report we have increased that. We now have over 4,000 facilities eligible to export their products to China with these 50 structural changes. That's why you're really beginning to see changes being made in our trading relationship. Our ag exports to China are now up 13% so far this year, just through August.
You know, Ambassador, staying over in the Asia space, in central Eastern Washington, send a lot of their software being over to Asia to be used in their products here, specifically here. Can you talk about our work in gaining greater access to markets for Washington products and U.S. products?
Well, you mentioned wheat, and I'm pretty familiar with that and our relationship that we've had with Japan that goes back to just after World War II, some 70 years. Washington State wheat farmers have been working with Japanese flour millers, and I describe it all over this country as one of the great relationships we have in agriculture in all the world. And I think that is a template for how we ought to be doing this going forward, not with just Japan, but with many other countries. And in fact, what we were able to accomplish a year ago at this time with the trade deal that we have with Japan, it's one of the great unsung trade deals in the history of agriculture, where we were able to get right about 90% of our ag products else that was doing the TPP thing. That was an agreement that was never going to U.S. Congress here. It didn't have the votes, but we were still able to get on January 1 of this year the same benefits as everybody else in TPP for U.S. agriculture and U.S. farmers. And that is a huge deal for us, particularly for wheat and beef and pork and poultry.
I'm hearing from a number of companies who are interested in the conversation about the U.S.-UK upcoming conversation around a trade agreement there. Can you give us a little preview of what you think will happen there, when that will take place?
Well, we actually just finished our 4th round of negotiations with the UK here last week. And you know, this is now, we're going through kind of the compulsory rounds of the process of a free trade agreement negotiation. It's really going to begin to ramp up here between now and the end of the year, I believe. And for agriculture, this is a critical discussion because this is an opportunity to have a different discussion with the UK than the extremely frustrating relationship that we have with the European Union in agriculture. You know, we have an $18 billion trade deficit with the EU just in agriculture. They really block the use of technology in agriculture, and in the U.S., that's what we're about, is using technology, using biotech, adapting, innovating. At the same time, the European Union is going backwards to that regard. This is an opportunity to peel the UK out of that and develop a 21st century relationship in agricultural trade that I think fit to U.S. producers and UK consumers going forward.
You know, Mr. Ambassador, as you think about Washington's products, and we've got some great best-in-class products that we produce, what are you most excited about as you think about Washington State and think about trade?
Well, there are so many things you do here in agriculture. It's just amazing to me. I note that our hay exports to China are up 78% just through the first 7 months of this year. Explosive growth in what you've seen there. Opportunities for what we have done with China on the dairy side of the equation. They import $12 billion in dairy products today. We have hugely increased the number of facilities, the number of new products that we can get into China. And on the beef side of the equation, we opened the Chinese market for the first time ever. Japan is already our #1 beef market. We've brought that tariff down significantly here with the Japan deal on January 1. So a lot of what we've done plays right into the wheelhouse of Washington agriculture.
Thank you for joining us. You're with today our Secretary of Agriculture, Derek Sanderson, in Central Washington, getting a firsthand view of some of our great products and crops here. Closing thoughts about trade in general and Washington State's role in that?
Well, you guys are very export-oriented, always have been. And that's actually one of the reasons I'm here is, to, you know, the best way to know how to help you move forward is to get out here on the ground, have conversations with producers, and say that we've made a lot of progress, but what do we need to do going forward in the next 4 years of the administration to keep the ball and keep expanding our access for U.S. ag products.
Thank you for joining us. Thank you for spending some time in Washington State this week. Be safe out there.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me. Nice to talk to you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Ambassador. We all know that American farmers and ranchers are all about working with their neighbors to get to yes and find solutions. Now, 2 of southwestern Washington's leading lawmakers are going to show us how it's done at the Washington State Legislature. We're joined now by Senator Annette Cleveland of the 49th Legislative District in southwestern Washington, a Democrat. She chairs the Health and Long-Term Care Committee and has also served on AWB's board of directors. We're also joined by Senator Ann Rivers of the 18th Legislative District, which covers most of Clark County. She too serves on the Health and Long-Term Care Committee and serves as the Republican Caucus Whip. Senators, welcome on into today's show.
Thank you.
Let's kick things off with infrastructure. It's only appropriate that we're sitting here at the mouth of the Columbia River. There's been broad consensus for more investment here to pull our state and nation through this recession and think about recovery. Can you talk about transportation needs in your region and how you're working across the aisle to move those forward? And Senator Rivers, let's maybe start with you if we can.
All righty. When the Columbia River crossing met its demise now 7 years ago, there was really no grave dancing. The call for a needed project ceased. It took us a while to come back together and do relationship and trust development in order to begin a project forward that would be more streamlined and more equitably divided between the states. We are at that point now and have been working well together to be able to promote such both in the legislature and in the community. For my part, the bridge is extraordinarily important. It is the lifeline of the West Coast. I have in my own district other needs that need to be met, and so I've been in discussion with transportation chairs about those in the event that there is something put forward.
Senator, I think you highlighted really well how important Interstate 5 and the role it is to our economic infrastructure. We just talked about trade. Certainly this is the lifeline for manufacturers and economy to move up and down the West Coast. We're having some challenges with Senator Cleveland participating, I think they're technology related. So Senator, I'm going to stay with you for a moment and move to another question. We recently did an employer survey of employers across the state of Washington, and the number one thing coming back from employers is they would sure appreciate some help from the Washington State Legislature to reduce the cost of doing business. Curious to get your perspectives. As they said, their number one thing would be B&O rate relief would be a helpful way to help them lower their cost of doing business. What's your thoughts about that as it goes into the 2021 session?
So I agree. I think that we have to look at B&O rate relief along with other burdens like unemployment tax, refilling the unemployment tax trust fund. I will tell you, in my humble opinion, there remains a call for a state income tax, and I've heard some of my colleagues comment to me that they would be willing to do B&O reform if we were to institute an income tax or a capital gains income tax. I continually hear that one of the three main revenue sources that the majority party is looking is an increase to B&O, which at this time seems like a very dicey move. We have lost about 2,000 businesses since COVID started. Those are businesses that are not coming back. So I think that if we continue to pile on financial burden to our small businesses and medium-sized businesses, we literally will be choking the goose that laid the golden egg, because we know that in economic downtimes, it's small business that actually leads us out. We have to make it easier for them to employ people who will earn money and spend money and then continue to drive the economy forward.
Thank you, Senator. I think Senator Cleveland, I think we now have you as well. Are you there?
I am, yes.
Thank
Chris,
you.
Hello, it's good to see you this morning. Hi, Senator.
It's great to be in your guys' district here, by the way. It really is. It's the sun is breaking through the fog this morning. It's really great to be here.
Yes. And how's traffic on our bridge today?
Thank you. This is our version of an ESPN game day set. We don't have all the props and all the fancy technology, but we're doing our best here to make it all happen. Senator Cleveland, let's start with maybe you for a moment, talk about healthcare for a moment. The pandemic certainly has showed us how important telehealth services are, especially in the state's rural issues. Be curious to get your perspective on both telehealth and supporting rural parts of our state as well.
Absolutely, Chris. Well, I don't have to tell you or how COVID has vastly changed all of our lives. And it has only pointed out just how immensely important technology to all of our learning, to doing jobs, to healthcare delivery, as you mentioned, and so for staying connected to one another in these really difficult times. But it's also clearly exposed the divide between those who have the ability, the resources, the services available, access internet, and those who don't. Even prior to COVID, there was a recognized need for additional broadband access in our state. And this has traditionally been left to the private sector, but increasingly, we've seen the need for this infrastructure to be also a public responsibility as well. Just like sewers, just like roads. And I work with my colleagues and others closely over the course of the last several years to help better ensure that our public courts might be able to assist in the investment of this really critical infrastructure, just as they do in other public works projects. The next step, however, in my mind, is to better support and encourage our private sector in public-private sector partnerships that are absolutely necessary in order for us to actually expand capacity and service. And I am committed to helping to support better encouraging those important partnerships because it's really all through our private broadband service provider businesses that we're going to be able to make impactful change in terms of expanding capacity and access for everyone.
Thank you, Senator Cleveland. Senator Rivers, thoughts about telehealth and rural broadband as well?
Well, I think that COVID has shown us where the cracks truly lie in our state, and among them are our broadband to more rural areas. So I think through public-private partnership, which actually Senator Cleveland and I both supported a couple of years ago, to allow the Port of Ridgefield to install dark fiber that then private businesses could offer services on. I think that we need to see a lot more of that type of activity. So I think that the answer is public-private partnership and not necessarily competition, but to look for ways we can join hands and solve the problem together.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Cleveland, I'd like to get your thoughts and perspective on this. Senator Rivers had a chance to answer this about how do we help our small business, how do we help employers of all size in the state as we go into the next session? We're hearing through some employer surveys that 66% of employers had to access PPP in our state. Can you think about where you might be on helping employers kind of reduce their cost of doing business and help them in this recovery mode?
Yeah. Obviously, we recognized before we ever left Olympia in this year's legislative session that COVID was going to have a devastating impact to our employees, to our businesses, to individuals across the state. And as a result, we were able to proactively work together to pass unanimously a COVID response bill that appropriated $200 million. And a portion of that funding was specified directly to employees and businesses. In addition to that, the governor took proactive action prior to signing the budget that we passed and sent him in this year's legislative session to veto out $450 million in cuts to new spending. And while that was painful, and there were a lot of really important, necessary projects that were included in that budget we passed, I understand and support his action to ensure that we were in the best position we could be as a state and be offering the support that we knew because employees, individuals, families were going to need. I think discussions I'm having with we learn from past mistakes. We don't take drastic measures to slash the budget as was forced to happen during the Great Recession. I wasn't in the legislature then, but I've learned from others of my who were that those cuts were difficult, obviously devastating, and in many, many cases, we are not back to the same level of funding today as was the case in 2008. So my approach is to take a very reasoned and balanced steps toward how we ensure that our budget is balanced in the state, but then also look at ways that we can support our businesses through all of the various tools we have available to us as a state to spur the economy. And in my mind, that means infrastructure investment, that means investment in transportation, that means investment in broadband, we just discussed, and that means investment in public works projects. That's really in that way that we are going to be able to better help and support our economy and our economic recovery.
Senators, I want to thank you for joining us. I wish you were on set with me, one. Two, these 10-minute segments go by so fast. We need to continue this conversation. I hope we get a chance to do so at the next AWB event. It's great to see this region's two senators on set, on stage, and working together. Any 10 seconds for closing comments from each of you?
Just really grateful for the partnership that we have with the AWB. You're always standing there with us looking for solutions, and I appreciate that.
I would second that as well. I was taught that politics really is the art of compromise, and it's about looking for common goals. It's about building consensus. It's about engaging that give and take that really gets us to the strongest policy possible for the people of the state. And I just consider myself fortunate that we have a business community in the AWB that is willing to come to the table and have the hard conversations to help us tackle the challenges that we face. And I'm very blessed to have Senator Rivers and others here in Southwest Washington who are always willing to pick up the phone or sit around a table and brainstorm and look for ways that we can solve big problems together.
What a special treat this has been to have Senator Rivers and Senator Cleveland with us. Be safe all out there. We'll see you at our next event.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
What a great start to this morning, folks, but we have a great lineup yet to come, including a conversation with UPS and our State Commerce Director, Lisa Brown. Thank you for joining us. Watch this short video. We'll be back shortly.
Premera Blue Cross is in your corner, wherever it may be. We're there for you at the corner of hustle and bustle, providing health plans for the most innovative companies in a region that's booming. We're also in the corners of places that aren't measured by size to ensure rural communities are well cared for too. We're in your corner for the bumps in the road and the long roads ahead, partnering with Seattle Cancer Care Alliance to have Premera people on site. We're in your corner the exact moment you need us. And when a whole community's in need, investing millions to fund mental health services and fight teenage homelessness. Premera is in these corners, and these corners, every day, working hard to make healthcare work better. We're Premera Blue Cross, and we're always in your corner.
Life is different these days, but that's not stopping us from living. Like spending quality time with family, supporting local small businesses, and doing what's right to keep each other safe. At U.S. Bank, we're doing our part to turn words into action. We're committed to investing in diverse communities by increasing grants and capital to support small businesses, housing, and workplace advancement. Together, we can create the momentum for positive change. Learn more at usbank.com/action.
Solis is a medical device technology company. We're focused on the wellness market with treatment of vitamin D deficiency through ultraviolet phototherapy. This is a very competitive labor environment, and so we really need to make sure that we attract high-end talent. Having a competitive healthcare package is extremely important. Going with AWB Health Choice, I think, was a good decision for us. It makes us more competitive in the market. Good healthcare is good business.
Alafia works to alleviate poverty and promote gender equality. We do that through the fair trade of sustainable resources in West Africa.
Private enterprise alleviates poverty.
Using a business to make money to help other people.
Our mission is heavily impacted by excessive regulations or taxation. And when the business is difficult, it means that you can't grow, and you can't grow, means you can't hire people. We believe that every human being deserves to have an opportunity.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome on back to the AWB Game Day set. We are live at stop number 4 on the 2020 AWB Manufacturing Tour. I'm Chris Johnson, President of the Association of Washington Business. If we've learned one thing over the past 7 months in Washington, it's a new appreciation and respect for the men and women that keep our economy connected. And I think it's easy to say that if you're like our house, you've seen that brown truck pulling up a time or 2 or 3, maybe even a week, delivering our packages. Today, in fact, you may see one crossing the bridge here as we're here in beautiful Vancouver, Washington, the bridge that connects Vancouver to Portland. So Mike, welcome on in. Mike is the Executive Vice President and Director of Marketing at UPS, longtime partner of AWB. So if you've been to our events, you've seen Mike there before. And boy, have they been busy delivering 22 million packages and documents a day all over the world. Mike, welcome in live.
Thank you, Chris. It's a pleasure to be here. And yes, it's been a very busy year so far.
By the way, if there's any packages being sent to my house, you could have them delivered here. I'll sign for them today.
Okay.
Hey, we had a chance back in August to talk about at our Federal Affairs Summit how important a federal infrastructure package would be. No doubt UPS relies upon an infrastructure system to move goods, products, and services. What are some of your thoughts about a federal infrastructure package?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, UPS is heavily reliant on infrastructure, and we've been an advocate for infrastructure modernization for years. It's not just a business thing. The average commuter spends 40 hours a year in traffic. It incurs almost $600 a year in repair costs due to roads in disrepair. The AAA Foundation for Traffic Safety estimates that roadway improvements can save 3,100 lives and 17,000 injuries per year. So it's not all about dollars and cents. So the debate remains around, where is the funding going to come from? What projects will get prioritized and completed? And whether the federal or state governments are going to take the lead. So bottom line is, the cost of doing nothing is very high, and UPS is a strong advocate for infrastructure improvement.
Hey Mike, thinking about infrastructure needs, do you have a couple priorities that are important for not only the Pacific Northwest, but Washington as well?
Well, if I lived in West Seattle, I would say the West Seattle Bridge. UPS's major concern really is congestion, especially along the I-5 corridor. It not only impacts our cost and time and fuel, but it also impacts our ability to service our customers. So it remains to be seen, really, what impact the pandemic will have on the long run, or in the long run, on congestion. But 3 things are clear, Chris. Infrastructure investment must increase. Infrastructure needs a sustainable funding mechanism, and infrastructure funding must be dedicated to infrastructure.
I think UPS has played a really important role in helping every type, every size of company grow and expand. what would be your suggestions to the state legislature to think about how they can be helpful in helping employers go through the recovery period and get through COVID-19?
Yeah, thanks. So the pandemic is definitely the largest disruptor that I've ever seen. It's transforming the economy rapidly. And I know this is a manufacturing week, but when you look at the impact on brick and mortar retail, it was enormous. We have seen manufacturers begin to quickly shift towards the more e-commerce and direct-to-consumer channels. So this requires additional investment in technology and new job skills. So perhaps look at ways to encourage or incent this investment on the part of our manufacturing businesses, and possibly job training programs that could help keep Washington manufacturers competitive and in Washington. And then also lastly, going back to the infrastructure, research shows that for every $1 billion invested in transportation infrastructure, 21,000 jobs are created. So another good reason to focus on infrastructure.
Mike, let's pick up on that comment about infrastructure funding and packages. Be curious to know if you have there's an active conversation about an infrastructure package at the state level, and it might include a new taxing source around carbon and all. UPS have some thoughts on that?
Yeah, in general, UPS doesn't, well, we have publicly stated that we are willing to pay more, or our share, for infrastructure investments. We don't really support or propose a particular mechanism. We just advocate that it's sustainable and it's dedicated to infrastructure. Having said that, this is my personal opinion. We already have a mechanism now for collecting transportation or infrastructure funds, the fuel tax and vehicle taxes. So do we really need to create a new mechanism? It's just food for thought.
So Mike, I'm sitting here in Vancouver. I'm here on the flight path. You're going to hear, I think, a UPS plane here in just a minute fly over me. For people who may not pay close attention, you're more than just brown trucks, are you not?
We are. We're very multimodal. I mean, certainly the most visible are the trucks, the tractor trailers that go over the road, and the aircraft. But we also provide container services for ocean, and we definitely are a heavy user of rail. So we are definitely multimodal.
So this is a complete audible. Our staff doesn't even know I'm going to do this here yet, Mike, but I'm going to put this little piece of trivia out there. The first person that can tweet back to AWB where UPS was started, I will buy you a cup of coffee. I'm not going to give the tease away anything more beyond that. Mike, you can't either.
I won't say anything, but I'll help you pay for the coffee.
There we go. There we go. Maybe we'll send them some. Maybe we'll send them some coffee in the mail. Hey, talk a little bit about, you have a dynamic workforce supporting employers in the state. Can you talk about just your footprint in Washington State for a second?
Yeah, it's approaching over 12,000 employees. The Northwest District is more than just Washington. We cover 6 states, but in our district alone, we've added over 500 drivers so far due to the pandemic. Approaching that same number of inside employees, and before it's all said and done with, before we get through the busy holiday season, those numbers are probably going to double.
Hey, let me pick up on that for a minute. How bullish are you about this coming holiday season? Do you think it's going to be busier than normal, or will you see your business picking up normal as people go to e-commerce? Curious some thoughts that you might have on that.
Yeah. Because of the increase that we saw, and you've talked about how many more shipments you're getting at your home, that will continue. It'll probably be heavier than this year versus last year. The issue is really capacity, and it's not just our capacity. The market capacity is really stretched right now and more or less full. So it's going to be a challenge, and I think you're seeing all the carriers try to make moves to be able to accommodate.
Well, I think we often talk about heroes, Mike, in this environment, whether it's our frontline defenders, it's our grocery store workers. I'd also say I think it's our delivery folks like your team at UPS who are delivering us, whether it be groceries or things we've ordered online or products to keep our businesses going and all. Mike, thank you for your partnership throughout the years here. And also, as AWB hands out our manufacturing award, we're so pleased that we continue our great partnership with UPS. If you were at last year's Evening of Excellence, you saw a UPS truck driver actually come on to the set with the UPS award. So, Mike, appreciate all your support.
No, I'm happy to do it, Chris, and good to see you again, and look forward to more.
All right, well, hey, have a great, happy holiday season. We hope you deliver a lot of brown boxes, and I'm sure there'll be some coming to my home as well.
Hope so.
Thanks,
A
Mike.
lot.
Thank you for joining us.
Bet.
And now we're going to check in with another partner for Washington's employer community, and that's Lisa Brown, Director of the Washington State Department of Commerce. Director Brown was there with us early in the pandemic, sharing emergency communications with employers throughout our state, and has been an important partner to us in our Rebound and Recovery Task Force that Vancouver's own Tim Schauer co-chairs. Lisa, you're going to see Tim here on set here later on today talking about this effort and others, but thank you for joining us. We're glad you're with us today.
Thank you, Chris. Happy to be with you.
Wish you were on set versus doing this remotely here.
It looks beautiful on both sides of the state today.
You know, I'm ad-libbing here a little bit. You'll appreciate yesterday I had a Go Cougs experience. I'm being asked when the Go Huskies experience will happen. It hasn't happened quite yet, but I'm sure it will happen here while we're here. Hey, we've had a chance to talk with both Darigold today and the U.S. Ambassador about trade. COVID's brought a lot of changes to global movement of goods. What are your thoughts and perspectives about the biggest challenges facing trade in our state?
Well, I was able to catch a little bit of those earlier presentations. I certainly agree that we have opportunities in agriculture, but we've got challenges right now too. Of course, just the downward global demand because of the virus is the number one challenge we face, but also the way that it's affected commercial aerospace. That's big, especially since that has traditionally been our largest export from Washington State. U.S. strong dollar, the continuing uncertainty around retaliatory tariffs. So no doubt there are definitely challenges that we face. On the other hand, there are estimates that global trade will pick up next year and indications that Washington's trade, although the United States trade deficit is at its all-time high, Washington State is continuing to increase in some non-aerospace exports and with a variety of countries and markets outside of China.
Curious to get your thoughts. We can't be the most trade-driven state and not think about exports here for a minute. What's your thoughts and advice about export opportunities for our state?
Well, here's the interesting thing, Chris. We have learned that we can convert our trade activity here at Commerce, thanks to Chris Green and his team, into a virtual environment, and that actually that opens up some new opportunities for companies that might not have participated in the past. And so we have conducted over 14 virtual trade shows with over 8 different markets, over 600 participants. And what we are seeing is that there are companies that might not have participated in a trade event, say a tech exchange that we do on an annual basis in Seattle or in Tokyo, but they can participate virtually. So that is really good news. And then the other thing is we get a federal grant called the STEP grant, and it enables us to assist companies that want to explore the international market, attend a trade show, whatever that might be. And I'm really pleased to report Washington State got the largest grant in the country this year, so over $1 million. So let's put my team to work, and companies should contact us if you are interested in an international experience and could use some resources in that endeavor.
Director Brown, picking up on that theme, Commerce has a lot of tools to help employers who are interested in exporting, especially first time to exporting in that market. You have a number of sector leads as well. Could you point people who are interested either in exporting more or getting into exporting where they might want to go to find that resource with Commerce?
Yeah, please check out our webpage or just contact us directly, because as you said, we have sector leads in aerospace, and despite the decline in commercial production right now, the aerospace sector is much larger than that. There's unmanned vehicles, there's space exploration and production of satellites. There are obviously in the energy space, we have some natural advantages with our low cost hydropower, but it goes well beyond that. We're We're leading in battery storage and in other technologies. So yes, please contact us, and our sector leads or our business development specialists in that area would be happy to work with businesses in Washington State and explore options for them.
We recently had a chance to complete our 6th statewide employer survey, Director Brown, and it's clearly one of the themes that came back is small businesses and businesses of many sizes are struggling in this period of time. What are some of your thoughts about what the legislature can do to help reduce the cost of doing business in our state?
Well, certainly the cost of doing business has got to be one of the key concerns, and the virus has often increased the cost or decreased on the demand side, for example, in the hospitality industry, or when meeting safety standards and just are not accommodating as many customers in a retail environment as previously. So I would say that a couple of key things for the legislature is that we need to look big picture. What are the investments that can be made that will actually build on some of our competitive advantages? I've already mentioned energy prices, but a skilled workforce is key. Infrastructure is really important. I'm happy that we are partnering, as we have in actual live trade shows in the past, in this conversation around broadband infrastructure, because that is having that affordable and accessible to every business and in every household is a key part of businesses sometimes pivoting to reach an online market. And I also believe that this could be a robust environment for major infrastructure investments. And those can reach all, you may think of that as mostly about construction, but it actually can reach all corners of the state and can provide that kind of key environment in which businesses can either locate here or expand. And with what we're discovering about teleworking, there are opportunities, I think, for some of our largest employers in the state, Amazon and Microsoft and so forth, to think about hub operations in all parts of the state. And certainly we are seeing activity and inquiries in Tri-Cities and Spokane and Moses Lake in Central Washington. So I'm ultimately fairly optimistic that we can weather this downturn and get to a better place.
I'd be curious to get your thoughts on broadband. We knew it was an issue going into COVID. I think COVID's only heightened it. It's not a rural issue, it's a rural, a suburban, and an urban issue. Your thoughts and perspectives on broadband?
Well, please do take advantage of our website at broadband.wa.gov and take the speed test, because having accurate data that we can utilize to build out our investments, whether they're federal or state, is really important. And it's not always just about having technological access. It's often whether or not it's quality, like the download and upload speeds. And I don't have to tell working parents that, who are sometimes working from home and their kids are doing school, and all of that is happening sometimes without the appropriate technological support that they need. So I'm looking forward to working with you, Chris, in the Rural Vitality Summit and exploring what some of the options are. We've got to get every federal dollar we can get and leverage that well with state investments. And we've got to be very neutral when it comes to technology or provider, right? Because it's not the right, different technologies work for different regions, especially given our vast differences in our rural and eastern and central Washington. And different providers have different things to offer. And so the broadband office sees itself as an entity that takes in that information, helps provide it the best to the policymakers, and really attract those resources and deploy them as quickly as possible. And some of these are short-term solutions like hot Wi-Fi drive-up hotspots, but as the weather gets worse, we need actual in-house locations that people can go to for accessibility if it's going to take a while to deploy specifically to their household or business.
Director Brown, we've got about a minute left, but curious to get your perspectives on PPE. There's been some companies that have done some really big work in this space that stopped producing X product and now making Y product. Can you talk just a little bit about how important this initiative and effort has been?
That is, and I can also tell you that it's very, very timely because we are starting to get some modeling and some forecasting about what we're going to be experiencing in the fall. And we are going to continue to need, especially high quality N95 masks and other types of PPE. So I would say the window is not closed on opportunities for companies to step up if they would like to help meet that demand. Not only in terms of the state stockpiling some of those resources to weather a really big spike, but also just the ongoing operations of business, especially as more economic activity hopefully begins to occur. But we still know that critical PPE is necessary. We've got some resources at Commerce, and I know the website that we've worked on through the rebound and recovery is really important resource for businesses to find that PPE. But I also just want to emphasize we're going to need more, and it would be great to have it be manufactured in our state.
Director Brown, I want to thank you for joining us. This literally, while we've been talking, has been planes, trains, and automobiles here today. It's commerce in action here in Washington State. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much, Chris, for inviting me. Happy to join you from my living room here in Spokane.
Be safe, Director Brown.
Thank you.
All right, and now we're going to check in with one of manufacturers' biggest supporters, a manufacturer himself, and that's State Senator John Braun. Senator Braun represents the 20th Legislative District just north of here and serves as the ranking member of the Senate Ways and Means Committee. He also serves on the Labor and Commerce Committee as well. He serves also as president of Braun Northwest and has been a stop in prior years on our manufacturing tour. Senator Braun, I wish you were here on set joining us, but we're going to do this thing remotely and virtually, but welcome on in. I know you've been working on a manufacturing package and would love to hear your thoughts and perspectives on that as well.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me. Yeah, so we have been working, recently egged on by the stuff going on with Boeing, but long-term focused on how do we address the continuing decline in manufacturing jobs in the state of Washington. And I'll be very simple with this. I haven't been able to broadcast it much because of the restrictions during election year. But since you asked, the plan would be to reduce the manufacturing rate to zero. For everyone, aerospace and everyone else. That obviously costs some money, and we offset that by a sales tax on legal services. We think for the broader economy, we're better off with promoting manufacturing jobs and growing that sector in the state of Washington. And the trade-off is a good one. And the only other thing I'd say is that puts us on a much more level playing field with other states around the country. Over the last 2 decades, most states have gone from a single factor control on their income tax or their tax structure, whatever it is, from a three part decision to a 1 part, which is just sales, which means if you're building something in, say, California and you're selling it to Washington, you're not paying any income tax. On the counter side, if you're building something in Washington and you're selling it in California, you're paying B&O and you're paying California income tax. So it's putting our manufacturers at a structural disadvantage to everybody else in the country, and we need to stop that.
Senator Braun, I'd like to get your thoughts on this. As you think about the last recession, it was the manufacturing sector that actually pulled us through that period of time. Today we have 30,000 less people working in manufacturing than we did just a year ago. What are your thoughts about the fragility of the sector and what we can do to help it move forward?
Well, I think in terms of fragility, I think manufacturing is a very diverse set of businesses, and some are under enormous pressure because of the pandemic. Think aerospace. Air travel has declined precipitously, and that's obviously driven a reduction in aerospace. Others are going gangbusters. Construction right now is, in spite of the economic downturn, is in good shape. So I think it depends widely, but fundamentally, what we can do as a state, I rely on those private sector organizations to create the jobs. What we can do is to create an environment that gives them a level playing field to compete with others. And that's what I'm really focused on. I trust that they will be resilient and responsive and innovative. What we can do is make the environment conducive for sustaining and ideally growing our manufacturing sector.
Senator Braun, let's talk about that environment for a moment. As you think about coming back to Olympia in January for the 21 session, what are 2 or 3 things that you think the legislature could do to impact that environment for job creators in the state?
Good question. So I think there's a few things we should be focused on. Number one in my mind is we should be focused, and we should have, I've said this many times, we should have been in session long ago figuring out how we balance the budget in a reasonable way that continues to deliver services to the state of Washington, but does not require additional taxes. And that's exactly what the current majority is talking about. Their intention is to come back and to balance the budget on the backs of businesses around the state, and there couldn't be a worse idea. We should be focused on getting our budget under control in a way that keeps a light touch on businesses around the state, helps them get back on their feet. The other thing I think that's really important we work on is the health of the UI trust. Our business sector has supported a very robust UI trust over the years. We entered this pandemic with one of the largest in the country, a combination of real need and frankly fraudulent and incompetent activity by the employment securities. We had the largest loss of funds in our state's history, and now we're going to have to rebuild that, and they're going to come to businesses to rebuild that. We should be thinking about other ways to do that, either with some of the stimulus money or some other way, so we don't put essentially a new tax on our businesses of all sizes around the state. And the last thing I would say is, one, you look at the bright sides. One of the good things about a pandemic is we figured out a way to deliver stuff with less regulatory interference. All kinds of proclamations out there taking down barriers to delivering services. Man, we should be looking for ways to make those permanent. That's what we should be doing.
Okay, Senator Braun, here's a fun one for you. In
All
30
right.
seconds or less, talk about how do we balance a budget?
Simple. So we're going to have to use the rainy day fund. We're going to have to undo some of the new spending that went into effect July 1. Had we done it before July 1, we would just be stopping new spending. Now, of course, it will be called budget cuts, but it's not really budget cuts in any meaningful way. We do those 2 things, and we're pretty dang close to a balanced budget, not just for this biennium, but for the 4-year. And then we can think about how do we afford things like covering the cost of wildfires. How do we afford investment in things that will help our manufacturing sector? But actually, I mean, it's a big hole. But if we act soon, we could do it in a very effective and responsible way. The problem is the governor and the majorities in both chambers continue to prefer to sit on their hands and hope something improves. I think it went over 30 seconds, but that's what I got.
Senator, I want to thank you for joining us today. I wish you were in person. I want to thank you for your hard work. We look forward to continuing to work with you as we go into the next legislative session.
All right. Thanks, Chris.
Thank you, Senator.
Have a good day.
Over the past 3 years, we've had a chance to see a wide variety of employers that fit with today's theme of supply chain, trade, infrastructure, and transportation. Here now are some of those organizations from across the state that have helped get manufacturers goods to services, and it comes to you from our friends at Big House Media Productions. Switching gears, there's been a lot said about infrastructure over the course of this year, from the federal to the local level. And now we're going to take a specific look. The Fix I-5 Now campaign has a simple mission, an I-5 bridge replacement project. Supporters of this initiative say the current I-5 bridge, which spans right behind me, is functionally obsolete, chronically congested, and faces costly maintenance and seismic upgrades. Here to help us learn more, we have Tim Schauer, Chairman of the Board at McKay Esposito and former AWB Board Chairman. Mr. Chairman, welcome.
Thank you.
And we have virtually Ron Ard, President of Identity Clark County. Ron, welcome on in.
Thank you, Chris. Appreciate it.
Hey, we both have the same background.
I know. It's awesome.
And if you paid attention to the Federal Affairs Summit, I think you had that same background.
You know, if we get our job done right, it'll be a different background in 10 years.
Well, replacing this span has been a bumpy one, just kind of like driving across it. How do you believe the public opinion has evolved over the fits and starts, and kind of where are we at with this? And Mr. Chairman, maybe I'll start with you first.
Well, I think the public has really evolved on this topic, particularly as we've faced some unique challenges in traffic and employment market balances, and we recently had to replace an aging trunnion on the lift span, and the public got another reminder of what it's like when this bridge doesn't function very well. I often refer to it as the aorta of this economy, and when it has a heart attack, it's pretty painful here.
Ron, thoughts on that?
Yeah, we've got about, in the next 20 years, we would have about $282 million of repairs to make on the deck and painting it and all that sort of thing. It also needs seismic upgrades, and if we would do that, that would add between $200 and $600 million. It would seem to us that it's a lot easier to just fix 5 and get a replacement bridge in place than it would be to throw money after this antique, which is now 103 years old.
Hey Ron, let's maybe start with you on this. Is the broader region, the bi-state region, unified kind of on where we're at and the next steps and the need to go forward?
Yes, in fact, we've been working with legislators on both sides of the river, and we started in 2014. And our chant from the very beginning has been we need to have a bipartisan, bicameral, and bi-state support for this to go forward. And we began in our own backyard by getting bicameral and bi-state and bipartisan support. And then in the last couple of years have really extended that to the state of Oregon. We're delighted that 8 Oregon legislators have joined 8 Washington legislators to help steer this project. And both states have actually kicked in funding to the replacement planning process, $15 million out of Oregon and $35 million out of Washington. So we are on the road at this point.
Thoughts about the broader region and its commitment to come together to move forward on this important project?
Sure, Chris, can you hear me? I was having a little audio trouble.
I can always hear you, Mr. Chairman.
You know, I think, to really not repeat what Ron said, I think one of the fundamental differences that Clark County, as part of the 7-county MSA, we now have our own mass transit system here. 10 years ago, we really didn't have it. C-Tran has effectively constructed our BRT on the 4th Plane Corridor, and they're talking about the BRT on the Mill Plane Corridor. And it's been a big difference for this community and the region to recognize that not everybody, mass transit's not for everybody, but it is going to be an important component of a transportation solution for this region.
Yeah, hey Ron, do you want to pick up on that and talk a little bit about kind of the conversation around mass transit? Where is that today? Where do you see that conversation going?
Sure, I think everybody understands that a bridge replacement does need mass transit, high capacity transit in one way, shape, or form. How we mesh the systems in Oregon and Washington are another question. And that's really going to be some planning efforts that need to take place as we get a little closer to a supplemental EIS, which we expect to be in high gear next year. But by and large, there's a recognition that mass transit, public transit is part of the solution. The actual mode of transit, really no one is putting their foot down at this point saying it needs to be this mode or that mode. Instead, we want to really look at the data and find out what would be the best solution for where we're at.
You have a great analogy. Let's pick up on it about this being the aorta for the region's economy, the aorta for infrastructure, the aorta for movement of goods and people. Talk about how important this is and maybe what you experienced not too long ago.
Well, I think the community understands that the Columbia River is the most stable economic freight corridor on the West Coast. It's got so many, from ag to raw materials to commuter traffic to freight from all the way to inland Canada to the Pacific. This corridor is so important to this region. I think 10 years ago, the bridge was seen as a commuter problem. It was hard to commute to Portland. Today, I think most businesses recognize it's a doing business problem now. If you're on one side of the river or the other, you are reticent to take business on one side of the river where it requires you to go to a meeting. To take 4 hours out of your day to make an hour-and-a-half meeting is not tenable. And when it begins to really be more than a commuter problem, it stifles business. And Ron and I are both involved in some strategic economic development recruitment to this region. The first question most recruitments ask is, what's your transit solution? And what's the long-term solution for the bridge? We have a short-term problem, but we need a long-term solution to unlock this region's potential in the seven county MSA, which is mostly Oregon. This county and Southwestern Washington competes so well for recruitments to the region that I think transportation is the one lift we need to solve in this region. And it's a lift span, so pardon the pun.
Well, speaking of lift, Ron, I'll come back to you in a second, but
Sure.
Speaking of lift, Tim, you've had a long history in this region. You do a lot of work around economic development. Talk to us about how important infrastructure is to facilitating the growth of this region.
I think infrastructure is Ron and I actually had this conversation more recently. We have so many advantages in this community, within the state and within the region. Transportation and a long-term strategy has been our stumbling block. And really in this region, Clark County is closer to the Portland International Airport than almost any other population base in the region. It's important for air travel and access to international markets. It's important to freight. And frankly, with the closure of the terminal port in the Hyundai port in Portland, I understood that every container results in another 10 trucks or something in the corridor. Ron would correct me. But we've had a tremendous impact on traffic just to get freight back and forth across the river. It is, I think most people here are more aware today that this becomes an impediment for their quality of life and the business community's function than it ever has.
Ron, you want to pick up on that?
Yeah, when you think about it, you've got a major metropolitan area. Vancouver and Clark County represents about 20% of the Portland-Vancouver metropolitan area, the second largest region in the Pacific Northwest. And yet we have what is essentially a two-lane, no-shoulder bridge because the third lane is an on-off merge. And it's just too tight for safety purposes. If we really want to grow our economy, build jobs in our area, and treat our entire metropolitan area as a single addressable market, we have to create a wider path for this aorta, as Tim describes, and make it truly a thriving corridor. I will point out that the 135,000 vehicles that are crossing that on a normal day, a non-COVID day, about 15% of those, maybe 20, are freight and commerce related. We have two critical ports that are right along this area, and freight and commerce interests need to be represented in this overall conversation. We've got work to do to plan and make sure that we are ready for the future for freight and commerce here.
All right, I have 3 questions and about 2 minutes to get through them, so we'll move quickly here. This will be the speed round version of this. Ron, I'm going to come to you first, all right?
All right.
So Port of Vancouver says $24 billion of economic activity go up and down the waterway here. So we've talked about how important the bridge is. Talk about how important the waterway system is as well.
Yeah, absolutely critical. And thanks to the ports and leadership across both states that we got that channel down to 43 feet so we can get big ships to the region. It's absolutely critical. And they come up to the Port of Vancouver, and that's as far as they come. So the bridge really serves as kind of the terminus of that 43-foot depth, but it's critical for our future.
Lifelong resident. How's the region changed over the last 20 years?
It's changed a lot in 20 years. When we moved here, there was no 205 bridge. Now we've got 2 bridges in this region. And the population explosion, both in the Vancouver market, Clark County market, and Portland market, has been really unprecedented. We're seeing substantial growth. There seems to be no end to it. And we need to balance that residential growth with employment growth on this side of the river. I have more employees today in my office, working in our office, who live in Oregon than ever before. This used to be, everybody in Washington commuted to Oregon. Now we see traffic on both sides of the bridge. It used to be a one-way commute problem in the morning or in the evening. Now it's both sides. And we've evolved in many, many ways. And this feels like the 103-year-old bridge is the last piece of our evolution that has to take place.
Tim, if I can with you, how important is public input, public engagement in the process of thinking about the new I-5 bridge?
It might be the most important. I know that the new team that is working on the bridge and infrastructure for the DOTs has an excellent public affairs team, and they've taken that as a really high priority. Ron's work has been instrumental in getting the public business community focused and understood. But one might argue a lack of public understanding was one of the critical things that disrupted our ability to get the bridge built last time around. Misconceptions, false facts, challenges about the bridge. We need a public to be educated accurately and understand the consequences of both building the bridge and not building it.
Ron, we're going to go to you for some closing comments. Thoughts about infrastructure, trade, logistics, and the bridge behind you.
Yeah, we're in a unique position in the world where you're sitting right now, and it's a critical area for roads, rail, runway. I mean, the whole bit converges right where you're at. So building a piece of infrastructure in this area is tricky. We have a lot of populations to keep in mind, but at the same time, it is the lifeblood. It is the critical nature of our area. And we've got to get this bridge ready for the next generation. We have the good fortune of having I-205 in place, which allows us to even have this conversation. But we've got to get this I-5 spine replaced as soon as we can.
Thank you, Ron, for joining us. Mr. Chairman, I'm going to give you the last word. Thoughts about manufacturing, trade, and the importance of a new bridge.
I think the Southwest Washington region can be a player in the state's economy, in the state's manufacturing. Frankly, I think we're an underwhelmed or underknown region. This is an important part of Washington's economy, and I think if we get this infrastructure done, we can continue to add and contribute to Washington's success, both on a business level and a quality of life level. Thanks for having me, Chris.
Ron R., President, CEO of Identity Clark County. Tim Schauer, Chairman of the Board for McCain-Esposito. Thank you both for joining us. For everyone, this concludes our second of the 3 segments that we have today. We'll be back to talk about PPE and the ports of Washington right after this short break.
When others feared what was to come, you saw a sliver of light, opportunity. And while some tried to go back, you're going all in. Rethinking, reinventing, smashing through new barriers and old fears. And we're right there with you, in the trenches, still grinding, still climbing, as you rally and rise. You are the one who can make this whole world turn. So be bold, be brave, be unstoppable.
At Travel Cheer, we do camp chairs, and we're all about getting people outside and making their experience more enjoyable and comfortable. We really want to take care of our staff, and we want a good work-life balance, and part of that for us was being able to offer them health care. By far, AWB offered much better health insurance through Primera than the other companies did, and at a better rate.
Our cranes are used in virtually every industry you can think of.
Some of our biggest work is with our proprietary product, the Lamson TransiLift.
Lamson employs about 120 people here in Washington State.
We firmly believe in giving back into our community.
Things that happen right here in Washington State can make us less or more competitive.
We understand the need for regulation within Washington State, but that regulation needs to be streamlined. You need to be able to react quickly to your customers because that saves them time and money.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to Manufacturing Live here in beautiful Vancouver, Washington. Thanks again to our partners at UPS, Walmart, and Boeing for making today's show possible. As I often say, Washington is one of the most trade-driven states in the country. we exported more than $60 billion of good in 2019, from aircraft to wheat and computers and so many other great products. All of these items have to get to market somehow, and chances are they're going to pass through one of our 75 ports. Washington ports serve as the foundation for our export economy, and joining us live today are two outstanding CEOs. Juliana Marler, the CEO of the Port of Vancouver, USA, and Diane Howard, Executive Director of the Port of Benton. Juliana and Diane, welcome on in.
Hi Chris, thanks for having us today.
It is great to be here in your region. Let's get started here talking about what have been some of the challenges that have faced ports during COVID. And Juliana, since you're our host port, let's go to you first if we can.
All right. So as you might imagine, ports move more than 70% of the goods that Americans use every day. And so with that said, we've been considered an essential business through the pandemic. And it's really critical that we keep the supply chain moving, particularly in a time of crisis. So, and the other thing is that, we have a significant economic impact in our local communities and across the state. But because of the necessary roles that port play in the overall supply chain and industrial jobs, we can be a leading force in the recovery efforts. So at the Port of Vancouver, we provide more than 4,000 direct jobs, and we have over 50 tenants. And it's really critical for us to support those businesses and keep supplies flowing to support manufacturing and distribution. And it's also critical to get products to market. Approximately 85% of our marine business is export. And we're a primary gateway for businesses across our state, primarily on the east side of the state, and across many states in the Midwest. Unfortunately, due to the pandemic, we felt the impacts of limited supply and disruptions to the supply chain. So really, our goal is to minimize that impact, keep businesses whole, and keep people working.
Thank you. Diane. Diane, can you hear us? All right, we're going to come back to Diane. I'm going to move on to the next question, Juliana, which is around the role of the Columbia Snake River system. The Columbia River EIS was recently completed, and I'd like to get your thoughts on what the final report speaks to and how important the dams play in this role of navigating goods up and down the Columbia Snake River system.
You bet. So, as you are well aware, environmental stewardship is very important to the Port of Vancouver. And we've been following, this issue closely, and believe that we can create a good balance between environmental stewardship and economic growth, and that points are reflected in the EIS. Understanding it's a complex issue. We recognize the important role that the Columbia and Snake River dams play for efficient navigation, and low carbon, cost-effective hydropower, flood control, water supply, and trade, as you've heard from several of our speakers. We also recognize the importance and support the ongoing salmon recovery efforts. As far as the future is concerned, based on the record of decision, the dams will remain in place. And it's critical now and in the future to understand impacts and find a balanced approach. We'll continue to work closely with our regional partners and continue to provide the best possible support to balance the environment and the economy.
All right. Hey, Juliana, our next question's around infrastructure. We had a great conversation with Ron Arp and Tim Schauer a few minutes ago. Can you talk about how the ports engage in this conversation? We know that infrastructure is a building block, not just for the ports, but for communities in general. How does the port engage in the conversation around infrastructure?
The transportation network is, whether it's road, river, rail, we actively engage in those conversations. Historically, we've been very successful in utilizing state programs such as Department of Commerce grants to support industrial development infrastructure, as well as federal programs like Tiger or Build to fund projects like our West Vancouver Freight Access Project. are critical to creating good family wage jobs and economic opportunity. Because of the nature of the port's business, we communicate regularly with our state and federal delegation. And as you've heard, we're very fortunate to have elected leaders representing us both at the state level and the federal level that understand the importance of infrastructure. Additionally, we're very fortunate to have some excellent associations in our area, such as AWB, Washington Public Ports, Pacific Northwest Waterway Association, and the American Association of Port Authorities. And they all do an excellent job advocating for infrastructure on our behalf. Did you catch that okay?
I did. I want to just say thank you. We've had some technical difficulties today. It's live broadcasting. Thank you for hosting us here at your port property. Ports play a really critical role in driving economic development in their regions. They're going to have an important role in driving recovery. Thank you for joining us today.
All right. Thank you again, Chris, for having me join your panel. Take care.
Thank you much. Now for something fun on today's show. Brian Mickey, our communications specialist and photo guru, had an opportunity to take a train ride this morning and interview Nathan Bruce, General Manager of Portland-Vancouver Junction Railroad, right here in beautiful Clark County. Let's take a look and hear from Nathan.
Hi, I'm Nathan Bruce, General Manager of the Portland-Vancouver Junction Railroad. I'd like to tell you a little bit about what we do here. We're a small short line located in Clark County. We've got about 40 miles of track and we service about a dozen customers along this line. The commodities that we carry vary from plastic pellets to sand, granules. We even have some golf course sand that we supply the local golf courses. There's a company here called Omega Industries. They produce panels, pre-manufactured track panels for crossings throughout North America. They're actually the largest supplier of the panels for the crossings. We've also got Canfield Transfer. What they do is they take in some of these bulk commodity cars that you've seen during the video, and those are loaded up with granules. Some of them are sand cars. We've got Lindy Gas up the street. They take carbon dioxide and argon cars and produce, I believe most of that goes to the production of microchips, actually. So we've got a very broad customer base here, always looking to grow that. We're a small operation. I've got a couple of guys that work for me, and we service the Clark County line here, and we've also got a presence down towards the Port of Vancouver where we service customers there as well. So we keep pretty busy throughout the course of the day. A lot going on. Primarily, we've got 2 locomotives in our fleet. This is a beautiful antique from 1965. It's older than I am, but with good maintenance. It runs like a champ, almost as good as the day it was manufactured. So the longevity on the equipment, this thing hopefully will serve us for many, many more years to come. I don't think we want to forget the most important thing.
We're joined now by Eric Temple, President of the Portland-Vancouver Junction Railroad. Eric, thank you for joining us today.
Well, thank you for having me.
Hey, share with us, how did you get into the railroad business?
Well, like all the railroad folks, I got into it through the family. My father was in the railroad business, and just like my general manager, Nate, that's how I got in.
I'd be curious, we know in transportation dollars are tight. Why should lawmakers be investing in short line railroads?
Well, short lines are unique in that they support local businesses, local communities in a way that no other business can. There really is no substitute for railroads. And while the big railroads, Burlington Northern, Santa Fe, and Union Pacific do a great job of hauling large numbers of cars over long distances, the personal service offered by short line railroads is irreplaceable.
Hey, when you look out ahead, talk about what the future is for railroads.
Well, I think the future for railroads is bright. With the carbon emissions, railroads are by far the most effective, efficient transportation source based on land use. And in the future, railroads will play an even greater part in commerce in Washington State.
You know, I'd be curious, you have a long and rich history in this space. What's changed in the railroad space since you got into it?
Well, the big change that we enacted was a change in the land use policy. One of our biggest concerns has been the Growth Management Act of the state of Washington, which does an excellent job of preserving certain resource lands. But one of our big changes was preserving large parcels of short line railroads served parcels.
You know, I'd be curious to get your thoughts on this. Many may not know the important role that freight has on the economy and the number of jobs it supports. Can you share a little bit about freight rail?
Well, freight rail definitely supports a lot of jobs. I don't have the specific statistics on that information, but like I said, the ports, as you know, the Port of Seattle, Port of Tacoma, Port of Vancouver, our three largest ports, are heavily dependent on rail traffic, as are many of local businesses and local communities.
Eric, I want to thank you for joining us today. Short line railroad plays an important part in our economy. I also want to thank you for giving our communication guy a first-hand view of what short line rail looks like. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for having me.
All right, thank you very much. Be safe. Now we're going to check in with a major ally for manufacturers and the economy of the state of Washington and Congress, and that's with Congressman Dan Newhouse, who represents the Washington 4th Congressional District. Congressman Newhouse is a member of the House Appropriations Committee and is a third-generation Yakima Valley farmer, having just come out of harvest season. Congressman Newhouse, welcome to Manufacturing Week Live. Congressman, I'd like to get your perspective as we welcome you in today. We know the Columbia Waterway system is critical to moving goods and freight up and down the river. It recently completed an EIS talking about the importance of the 14 Columbia and Snake River dams that are in the system here. Can you speak to what does this final study actually mean, and what type of certainty does it give Washingtonians?
Well, absolutely, Chris, and thanks for having me on with you today to talk about some of these really important issues. So, Columbia Snake River system, vital to the Pacific Northwest, provides clean, renewable, carbon-free hydropower. The benefits are just tremendous throughout our state and, like I said, this region of our country. But as you so rightly point out, our agricultural industry relies on irrigation, also the transportation that's made possible by the dams, that they provide truly a highway for us to move our products, our goods, up and down the Columbia and Snake Rivers to the ocean ports on the West Coast. We all know that barging enables the movement of those products for our state, but also for a large part of this region, all the way into the Dakotas, Montana. So it's a big part of the economic dynamic impacting many states. And it also, by allowing producers in this part of the country to move their products to an ocean-going port, that increases our marketing capabilities, which has just been a tremendous benefit. But you can't overlook irrigation. Without the system as we have it, it would be impossible for us to be the agricultural powerhouse that we are, to be able to produce the numerous number of crops that are grown and sold in the state of Washington. The reason why we are agriculture, one of the largest parts of our state's economy. And this decision that you talk about, Chris, is truly critical and significant. It will provide the agricultural industry with stability and certainty on into the future.
You know, Congressman, it's only appropriate we're talking about trade and the Columbia River system, and I'm sitting at the mouth of the Columbia River. It's right behind my shoulder here. You're a former secretary of the state's agriculture department, and we spoke with Ambassador Dowd just a few minutes ago. Can you talk about how strong our agriculture sector is and how important it is to the Washington economy and to your congressional district?
Oh my goodness. Well, you know, everybody thinks of Washington State for the aerospace industry. And when I talk to my colleagues around the country, and certainly they may be familiar with our apples, other products that are iconic to our state, but don't truly, in fact, I think a lot of Washingtonians probably don't even realize how significant the ag industry is to our state. When I was Director of Agriculture, I think there was approximately $11 billion of direct economic contribution by the agricultural industry. And if you spread that out to all of the other kinds of impacts it has in our economy, I think the multiplier takes it up to about $40 billion. And so we're right there neck and neck with aerospace as far as the contributions we make. The interesting thing about agriculture though, Chris, we have it in every single county, all 39 counties in the state of Washington. Aerospace can't say that. So I'm very proud of our diverse agricultural industry. The quality of the crops that we produce in Washington state are not only known, but they're sought all around the globe.
Your Congressman, Washington State, and for that matter, the entire West Coast has experienced a record wildfire season. What can the federal government be doing in partnership with states and tribes to address this challenge?
I'm glad you asked that. If you were here, I would ask you to look out my front window. You can still see the smoke. I think this is coming up from California. We've had smoke around our area for several weeks now. But you know, the federal government has a large footprint in central Washington. The government owns thousands of acres, and with that ownership comes a responsibility for properly managing those lands, those grasslands, those timberlands, for one reason, but many others, to prevent these catastrophic fires. And we've made a lot of progress, frankly, over the last few years in Congress. We've empowered the Forest Service to better manage their lands by eliminating the fire borrowing, where they used up their whole budget to fight fires and didn't have enough to do the proper maintenance that they need to prevent these fires. So we've made some progress there, but still more work needs to be done. And I think one of the things that we can do as a government, a federal government, is empower some of those local entities, whether they're private, whether they're tribal, whether they're state, local governments, conservation groups, to help responsibly care for our lands by clearing out dead trees and the underbrush. That all of those things provide literally a tinderbox that just feeds into these catastrophic fires. Another thing we can do is work to eliminate some of the federal regulations that truly impede our ability to keep our forests and grasslands healthy. And I mean like allow permits to move faster. Did you know that when a forest burns, some of that timber has commercial value, but the time it takes to get a permit in order to go and secure that or harvest that, by the time that permit has been granted, the timber is no longer saleable. So we need to do some things like that would actually help us accomplish our goals. There's some bills pending right now, a couple of them, one by my neighboring colleague, Kathy McMorris Rogers, who's encouraging and incentivizing some of these public and private partnerships that I talked about. So there's things that are happening, and I'm very hopeful that we can make strong progress here. One of the things that people have to remember, though, Chris, just real quickly, you know, we passed legislation to provide more management in these forests. That doesn't mean the answer or that the problem is solved overnight. It's going to take time. We have millions of acres to deal with, and we have to stay focused to make this a reality, to have properly managed federal lands.
Congressman, we're known for being world-class in a number of products, whether it's our aerospace products, but for this piece, our wine, and you happen to be the co-chair of the Congressional Wine Caucus. Can you talk about how bright the future is for Washington wines, which are the best wines in the United States?
Absolutely, and I'm glad you brought that up. You know, one of the things that I tell people, I am the very first non-Californian to be a co-chair of the Congressional Wine Caucus. So that's a huge honor, and I'm happy to be in that position with my colleague Mike Thompson from California, who's the other co-chairman. You know, if you look at the history of our industry, it goes back quite a ways, over 100 years actually in the state of Washington. I live on Snipes Mountain actually, where one of the very first wineries was located. In fact, some of those original vines are still up there. But if you go into recent history, back in the 1980s, I think maybe we had about 20 wineries in the state. Just last year, we surpassed the number 1,000. So we have truly grown in just a couple of decades, and we'll continue to grow. Back in the 90s, we cultivated about 11,000 acres, and I think, I don't have the exact number, but I think the more current number is not 11,000, it's more like 60,000 acres of wine grapes in our state, and we still have a lot of room to grow. We just added our 16th AVA, the viticultural area. So as the number 2 producer next to California in the United States, you know, the impact to our state's economy is huge. I think it's over $8 billion annually. And because of the tremendous reputation that Washington wines have and the growing following, people love our wines. They are high quality, big flavors, so versatile. I think the future is very, very bright for Washington State wines.
I think it might surprise people that today we have over 1,000 wineries in our state. What a point of pride for Washington as we think about what we grow in our state.
It truly is. It really is something that it's one of the bright spots in our agricultural industry. Certainly has, you know, not immune from the impacts of market ups and downs, and this COVID crisis that we're in certainly has impacted the wine and beer industries and all of those things as well. But we produce a quality product here, and that's going to keep us in good stead for many years to come.
Congressman, we've got about a minute left, but if you could spend some time just talking about how important trade is and how important exports are for your congressional district and for our state.
Oh my gosh. So we like to say, in fact, some people say that we're the most trade dependent state in the union. That's dependent has kind of a negative connotation. I think that trade, though, is so impactful for us. Well, we produce way more than we consume in this state. Those markets that are so important to us as the closest state in the lower 48 to the important Pacific Rim, we are uniquely positioned geographically to fill much of the demand for some of the high quality products we produce. And so our industry, our agricultural industry, there's a reason why we are so successful. It's because we have high quality products in our close proximity to important markets. We truly have a bright future moving forward. And I'm delighted that the current administration has focused so much on improving our ability to export.
Congressman, I want to thank you for joining us today. It's been a great conversation. Thank you for all your support and partnership to trade in our state and to the employer community and to manufacturers. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much, Chris. Enjoyed being with you.
Be safe out there, Congressman. We have a fun piece. This is called our AWB Game Day set. And yesterday, if you tuned in, you happened to see a chance where we had a Go Cougs part of our program. Today, we have a Go Huskies part. And we're joined by the Executive Vice President for the Port of Vancouver, USA, Mike Bomar, a former pitcher for the University of Washington baseball team.
Go Dogs!
Go Dogs! So we had Cougars yesterday. It's Huskies today.
Yeah, excited to see the Pac-12 getting up, ramping up next month as well too. I'm a Coug as well, so I have to say go Cougs, but go Dogs, my alma mater. Love to wear the purple and gold, and happy to have you guys down here today. So pleased that AWB is here, and you guys are such outstanding partners for ports across the state and for all of our businesses. So thank you so much for all you're doing.
Mike, I want to thank you personally, thank Juliana, the whole team. This has been a great experience, but you're also great partners for us in our efforts to advocate on behalf of employers throughout the state. So thank you.
Thanks, Chris.
Well, folks, that concludes day 4 of our Manufacturing Week live show. It's right here at the mouth of the Columbia River at the Port of Vancouver, USA. Again, many thanks to their help for making today possible. I also want to thank our partners and sponsors at UPS, Alaska Airlines, Walmart, Boeing, and Primera for making this show happen. Stay tuned tomorrow. We've got another great lineup for you. Tomorrow's show talks about agriculture, food and beverage manufacturing, and distribution as well. We'll highlight some amazing companies like Talking Rain, Walmart, Kettle Cuisine, and so many others. Join us tomorrow at 11:30 for day 5 of the AWB 2020 Manufacturing Tour. Signing off from the mouth of the Columbia River, where $28 billion of the economic activity flow up and down, and the aorta of the region, the Interstate 5 bridge behind us. Thank you, be safe, have a great night.